I woke up to the sound of whispers, soft, deliberate, poisonous. The hospital room smelled of disinfectant and wilted flowers. I was still half dazed from heart surgery when I heard her voice. "Me daughter-in-law, Vanessa. Ethan's father won't be able to make decisions for weeks," she murmured into her phone. "We should move forward with the sale while he's still recovering. That land isn't worth much anyway." She thought I was unconscious. I wasn't. I just kept my eyes closed and pressed record on my phone beside the pillow. The Caldwell Farm, 210 acres of apple trees and rolling pasture in Apple Creek, Vermont, has been in my family for almost a century. My son grew up climbing those trees. My wife and I built our lives on this soil. But to Vanessa, it was nothing more than a retirement shack on dying land. She wanted my son to sell everything to trade our family's roots for a glossy suburban life she could broadcast to her followers online. What she didn't know was simple: while she was planning to sell my farm, I already owned her parents' mortgage. And that recording in my pocket was the seed of a harvest she would never forget. The first thing I noticed was the clock. A cheap analog with a jittery second hand that didn't so much tick as stutter. 2 little hops, a pause, then another hop. 6:18 a.m. The sun was barely up over Apple Creek, but the room on the 3rd floor of St. Albans felt like late afternoon, heavy, fluorescent, and airless. Somewhere down the hall, an 4 machine chimed a bored little warning until a nurse shushed it with a button and a sigh. I tested my breath. It hurt, but it was steady. The surgery had gone well, the doctor said. They'd rebooted my heart like an old laptop, his word, not mine. My chest felt like a door someone had opened with a crowbar and then politely shut again. I kept my eyes closed, listening. When you've farmed nearly 7 decades, you learn to tell a day's weather by sound alone, the way wind fingers a tree limb, the way rain edits the silence. You can tell people that way too. My son, Ethan, has a careful, earnest cadence, always aiming to land his words in a soft place. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, speaks like a camera is always rolling. "Hi's, it's me. We're all set." Her voice hovered near the foot of the bed, syrupy and hushed in the way people whisper secrets they want overheard. "He's asleep. Sedated. Today's perfect." I didn't move. I slid my thumb along the edge of my phone, tucked beneath my blanket, found the red circle, and pressed. "Right," she went on, "Caldwell Farm. 210 acres. House, barn, processing shed, cold storage. Honestly, it's a teardown situation, emotionally complicated real estate. The appraiser said maybe low 7s, but I'm thinking we go aggressive, bring cash buyers to the table and be done. There's a particular tone I've heard 1,000 times in my life, some city voice standing in my orchard, talking like land is an inconvenience that only needs better branding. Vanessa lived in that tone. She didn't see soil, she saw space. She didn't see trees, she saw obstacles. A nurse slid in to check my vitals. Her badge said Rita. She pressed 2 fingers to my wrist and smiled, the kind of smile sick men remember for months. "How's our heart today, Mr. Caldwell?" I made a foggy sound, something between a yes and a yawn. Vanessa pivoted toward the window, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "He'll be groggy all morning," she told whoever was on the line. "Ethan has the POA paperwork. We can sign on his behalf if necessary. The main thing is to get it under contract before he starts interfering." Interfering. I thought about a January morning 20 years ago, pruning gala branches with my boy. Ice fog hung just above the rows, every clip of my shears sent down a tinkle of frost. "Cut above a bud that wants the sun," I told him. "Don't fight a tree's instincts." He was 12 and solemn, and I mistook that for agreement. Now I know he was just memorizing me. Rita adjusted my drip, checked the numbers on the monitor. Vanessa kept talking. "Yes, Apple Creek, 15 minutes outside St. Albans. It's quaint. Rustic. Authentic, if you're into that. But it's dead weight for us. We're relocating to Boston anyway. Ethan's job can go hybrid, and I've got brand partnerships lined up. Farm life just doesn't fit the plan. My heart rate monitor blipped a faster beat. Rita noticed, glanced at me, then at Vanessa. Her eyebrows raised a fraction, as if to ask if the whisperer ought to whisper elsewhere. Vanessa smiled back polite, impenetrable, and drifted toward the hallway. "Look, I don't want to get bogged down in local sentiment," she said, pronouncing the last two words as if they tasted like boiled cabbage. "We present it as an opportunity. 210 acres ripe for redevelopment, vineyards, agritourism, boutique retreat, whatever. The house is a non-issue, trust me. It photographs smaller than it is, and it smells old. The house. The house my father raised 4 kids in, that I rebuilt after the chimney fire in '87, that my wife painted yellow the summer she grew her hair out and decided to forgive me for something I can barely remember now. A non-issue. Can you do Thursday for a walkthrough?" Vanessa said. "Great. I'll keep Ethan focused on logistics. He's very sentimental about the orchard. I'm working on that." Rita finished her checks and leaned near my ear. "You need quiet," she whispered. I moved my lips the smallest amount. "Not yet." Rita nodded, tucked my blanket at the edges the way good nurses do, and left us in a hush thick enough to fold. Vanessa drifted back to the foot of the bed and snapped a photo, my hand, the 4, the pulse ox glowing red like a firefly. Day 3, she typed aloud for her audience, not for me. Caring for family is hard but necessary. Sometimes tough decisions protect everyone's future. I have read ledger books by lantern light. I have written promissory notes on the hood of a pickup in February wind. I have sold apples to people who only wanted photographs and then watched them eat a second apple before they reached the car. There is a world where language is currency and image is mortgage. Vanessa lived there. But paper still rules both worlds. Deeds. Notes. Assignments of debt. "Ethan can sign," the voice on her phone must have asked. "Of course he can sign," she breathed. "He's the only adult in that family who wants a real life." I heard footsteps in the corridor. "Ethan's. He walks like he apologizes, heel toe, as if stepping on your floor might hurt it." He paused at the threshold, taking in the tableau, his wife by the window, me sleeping or pretending to, the clock second-hand hopping in 2 counts. "How is he?" he asked. "Resting," Vanessa said, palming her phone behind a bouquet of daisies that had seen better days. "You should get breakfast. We've got a lot to do." "What lot?" Ethan asked. She smiled and smoothed the sleeve of his jacket. "Just logistics." I let the room breathe them for a few minutes, then coughed. Ethan was at my side in a step and a half. "Dad?" I blinked my way to a thin smile. "Still here," I said. "Do you need anything?" "Coffee," I said. "And a calendar." Vanessa let out a small, bright laugh. "You're funny this morning. What day is it?" I asked, eyes on Ethan. "Tuesday," he said. "Doctor says you'll go home Thursday or Friday." "Thursday's good for me," I said, slow as a winter stream. "Lots ripen on Thursdays." Ethan squeezed my shoulder, relieved to hear me making old man jokes. Vanessa checked her reflection in the black TV screen and smoothed her hair again. A nurse wheeled past with a breakfast tray that smelled vaguely of oatmeal and resignation. The clock hopped to 6:31. They left to find coffee. The door side shut behind them. I opened my eyes fully and stared at the ceiling tiles, each one a neat little rectangle with a perforated face, pretending to be permanent. I stopped the recording and saved the file under the oldest name in a farmer's book, Proof. There was a time in my life when the Caldwell way meant action at first light. Call the banker. Fix the fence. Hitch the brush hog, beat the rain. The older I get, the more I trust a different rule: let fruit finish on the branch. It sweetens while you wait. So I waited. I let my heart keep its new, careful rhythm. I let the clock hop its 2-count waltz. I let my daughter-in-law sell the story she needed to sell. And I began the quiet work of harvest paperwork instead of ladders, signatures instead of picks. Because while Vanessa was arranging a walkthrough for land she didn't own, I was reviewing a mortgage she didn't know I held. She would learn the difference soon enough. The first week after I came home from the hospital, Apple Creek was drenched in that soft, late September sunlight that makes even the rust on a barn look noble. My chest still ached where they'd wired me back together, so I moved slow coffee, porch, notebook. From that porch I could see the orchard sloping toward the creek, rows of Honeycrisps and Macoons catching fire in the morning light. To me, it was home. To Vanessa, it was a backdrop. She arrived every weekend now, a different outfit, a different phone case, always some new, content concept. She called them shoots. I called them insults with a tripod. Morning, Henry, she'd say, the way people say, hi, Siri. Then to her phone, hi guys. Back at the Caldwell Orchard, look at this place. Real old school vibes. I swear, it's like stepping into a history textbook. She'd spin, catch herself in sunlight, make the sky look cinematic, and sigh as if the world owed her sympathy for surviving a place without valet parking. I'd sit on the porch steps, mug in hand, pretending to read seed catalogs. The trick to dealing with show horses and influencers is the same: stay quiet and let them circle until they tire. Ethan filmed sometimes too, though he didn't look happy about it. Just for engagement, he told me. She's trying to make this lifestyle relatable. Relatable to who? I asked. He hesitated. People who dream of peace, I guess. Simplicity. Simplicity was my brand long before Vanessa trademarked it. I built this farm with calloused hands and silence. I didn't need hashtags for either. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and searched Vanessa Reed Caldwell. Her page glittered with pastel filters and moral captions that never quite matched her actions. Escaping stagnation, one post read beneath a photo of our kitchen stove, an old Chambers gas range that still worked better than any modern gadget. Breaking generational patterns, another declared, paired with a picture of our chicken coop at sunset. Every clip had the same melody of pity and aspiration, the same implication: she was bravely clawing her way out of a mud-stained legacy. And it worked. 50,000 followers. Brand deals for organic skincare and designer boots, inspired by rural living. Each time she posted, the comments stacked like rotten apples. Queen of authenticity. Can't believe you survived there. That kitchen is vintage goals or trauma. The likes weren't the worst part, it was the tone. Pity wearing pearls. Ethan scrolled beside me one evening, cheeks flushed. She's not trying to hurt you, Dad. She's just performing. That's the problem, I said. Performing life instead of living it. He sighed. She wants to build a future. So did I said. I just built it with dirt instead of Wi-Fi. He didn't answer. He never does when truth gets personal. Within weeks, Vanessa's following doubled. She'd film the orchard and call it the wilderness of failure, or show my ledger books and call them time capsules of poverty. One clip even featured me in the background, blurred but visible, stacking crates of apples. The caption read, "Still clinging to the old ways." 43,000 people watched that one. I stopped counting after that. But one night, I clicked on her stories again, more out of caution than curiosity. She was sitting on our back porch, glass of wine, candlelight softening her expression. Sometimes I wonder, she told her audience, if love can survive different ambitions. My husband's family still believes success means staying put. But I believe success is motion. Success is motion. I wrote the phrase in my notebook. I've seen motion dust storms, floods, men chasing fads until they lose the ground under their boots. Motion isn't progress, it's just restless. Next morning, I found Ethan in the barn, checking oil levels on the tractor. You two fighting? I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. She thinks the farm's holding us back. Says we could buy a house in Burlington, maybe open a small business. With whose money? She says we'd have plenty after selling this place. I looked at him. He only son, bright, loyal, just naive enough to think decency always wins. Ethan, what do you think this farm's worth? I don't know, maybe 900,000. The realtor she talked to said it's underdeveloped land. I chuckled, a low, tired sound. Underdeveloped, I repeated. Tell her to check the books before she undervalues my life. He frowned. Books? Dad, you still do everything by hand. Vanessa says. I know what she says, I cut in. That's why she's about to learn what paper really means. That night I sat at my kitchen table, ledger open, reading through numbers she'd never bothered to ask about: contracts, revenue from cider shipments, dividends from properties she'd never seen. My pen scratched slow lines across the page while her voice echoed from the living room. She was on a live stream. You have to know when to let go, she told her followers. When comfort turns into complacency. Comfort. She didn't see the frostbitten mornings or the years I fixed roofs between harvests to cover tuition for the very man she married. She saw only stillness and called it failure. Later, I stepped into the hallway and watched her pack for another content trip. She folded silk dresses into a suitcase that still had the store tag dangling. Partnership shoot, she said without looking at me. It's good exposure. You've been getting plenty of exposure lately, I said. She smiled, that influencer smile, polished, polite, hollow. Then you should thank me. People know the Caldwell name again. I never needed fame, I said. Just honesty. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes, not guilt, but curiosity. Like she'd finally realized the old man might be keeping score. Anyway, she said, snapping the suitcase shut, once the sale's done, you'll finally rest. Isn't that what you want? I let the silence do the work. She took it as consent. When her car's taillights disappeared down the gravel drive, I went to my desk and opened a locked drawer. Inside was a single folder labeled Read Mortgage, Apple State Bank. I slid the recording from the hospital next to it and whispered to the empty room, let's see whose comfort turns into complacency now. Outside, the orchard sighed in the wind, leaves turning the color of old copper. Vanessa thought she was crafting a story for her followers. She didn't realize she was already a character in mine. By the first week of October, the air in Apple Creek had turned sharp enough to taste. The nights smelled of wood smoke and wet leaves, and the mornings came wrapped in fog that moved slow through the orchard, like it was inspecting the apples one last time before winter. I could hear the pickers finishing the late harvest, laughter muffled under the drone of the packing machines. Business as usual, except that this year, my biggest crop wasn't apples. It was information. I kept the hospital recording on my phone, replaying it every night like a prayer with teeth. Each time I heard Vanessa's voice saying, the farm's a teardown situation, my pulse steadied, not spiked. Anger wasn't the tool here, patience was. My father used to say, never plow wet ground, you'll only bury the truth in mud. So I waited until the ground and the evidence were ready. When the time came, I drove into St. Albans, the first long drive I'd taken since the surgery. My truck still smelled faintly of motor oil and cider vinegar from decades of hauling barrels. The city had changed, more traffic, more chain stores, but the Hayes and Jennings building still stood where it always had, a 3-story brick cube with windows that looked like they'd been installed back when phones had cords. Inside, the receptionist greeted me like an antique that still ran. Morning, Mr. Caldwell, she said. Miss Hayes said to go right in. Diana Hayes, my lawyer for nearly 30 years, had one of those smiles that could slice glass. "Henry," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I heard about the surgery. You scared half the county." "I'm hard to kill," I said. "Just needed a tune-up." She laughed. "What brings you in? You finally writing that succession plan?" "Something better," I said, setting my phone on her desk. "A lesson plan." She raised an eyebrow. I pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room. "We should move forward with the sale while he's recovering." The audio was crisp, damning. Diana didn't speak until it ended. "Do I assume your son's aware?" "Not yet," I said. "He's still choosing which side of the fence to stand on." "And you?" "I'm just building the fence," I said. "And I'd like it made of paper." Diana understood immediately. "You want everything documented. Every asset. Every lien. Every mortgage I hold, every company I own, every contract she's ever mocked on social media. If there's a scrap of paper that proves this farm is worth more than she imagines, I want it catalogued and notarized." She smiled, a slow, dangerous thing. "You're not planning revenge, Henry. You're planning education. Call it whatever you like," I said. "But I want her to learn it in public." We spent 2 hours outlining every holding tied to the Caldwell name. Caldwell Orchards LLC, registered 1988. Caldwell Storage and Cider Works, established 2002. Maple Hollow Rentals, 16 residential properties scattered through Franklin County. Silver Brook Holdings, an investment shell that owns stakes in the very grocery chains selling our apples. And then came the jewel, a quiet, steady investment I'd made 5 years ago through a private bank sale, the mortgage on the Reed's home in upstate New York. Diana glanced over the papers I brought. "They really don't know you own this?" "Not a clue," I said. "Robert and Linda think the note still belongs to Hudson Mutual Bank. When the company folded, I bought a bundle of distressed loans through an intermediary. Their address was just one of dozens." She scanned the numbers. $980,000, 30-year fixed. "You've been collecting payments?" "Through a management firm in Albany," I said. "They pay on time, but barely. If they miss a month, the foreclosure clock starts." She looked up, her expression caught between admiration and disbelief. "Henry, this could get messy." "Only if I let it," I said. "For now, I just want a full accounting. I need to know exactly what levers exist before I touch any." By the time I left, the folder was thicker than my old Bible. Outside, the wind had picked up, shaking loose the first serious fall of leaves. I drove straight to Mark Jennings, my accountant, who'd been balancing my ledger since Reagan was president. His office smelled of coffee and pencil shavings, just like always. "Mark," I said, sliding the folder across his desk, "I need every figure current to the last cent." He adjusted his glasses. "You selling the orchard?" "Not quite," I said. "I'm reappraising its value for a very specific audience." He flipped open the first page, lips pursed as he read. 16 rental properties, 3 commercial. Orchard revenue, just under $3 million last fiscal year. And these investment notes, he trailed off, reading the line that made him sit a little straighter. "Henry, this says you hold the Reed's mortgage." "That's right." He whistled low. "That's your daughter-in-law's parents." "Seems that way." He looked at me over his glasses. "You planning to pull that trigger?" "Not yet," I said. "Right now, it's just insurance." Mark tapped his pen thoughtfully. "You always were a patient man." "Patience built these acres," I said. "Impulses ruin them." He chuckled, then sobered. "Ethan doesn't know." "He's in love," I said. "And love makes a man blind enough to walk into traffic. I'm just here to make sure he sees the headlights." When I got back to the farm that evening, the sky was burning pink behind the silo. Vanessa's SUV was parked near the barn, doors open, trunk loaded with props, woven baskets, a gingham blanket, some store-bought cider she pretended was homemade. She was filming again, perched on a hay bale like a magazine ad. I watched from the kitchen window as she lifted an apple, bit into it, then grimaced too tart for her city mouth. She laughed for the camera. "See, guys. Farm life is tough but cute. I can't believe people actually live like this." A laugh track from her followers would come later. I opened the new folder on my desk and stared at the header, "Read Residence Mortgage Note." Beneath it was a line I'd highlighted in yellow: "Failure to remit payment within 30 days constitutes grounds for foreclosure." Not yet, I told myself. You don't prune in full bloom. You wait for frost. That night, I called Diana and Mark again. "Next steps," I said. Diana replied first. "Do you want us to alert the Reeds Bank of your intent to review the loan?" "Not yet," I said. "Just draft the paperwork." Quietly. Mark chimed in. "And Ethan? When are you going to tell him?" "When he's ready to see his wife for who she really is." After the call, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The ticking clock above the stove sounded just like the one in my hospital room. The difference now was that I wasn't the one under observation. Vanessa thought she was making moves in secret, that I was too old or too weak to stop her. But every sale leaves a trail and every trail ends in a signature. She was chasing a sale. I was following the paper. And paper always wins. By mid-October, Apple Creek had that brittle kind of quiet that comes before winter, the sound of a town holding its breath. The leaves along Route 7 turned copper and gold, and every gust scattered them like someone emptying a box of coins. From the outside, the Caldwell farm looked exactly the same, barns red with age, fences leaning like old men, smoke curling from the chimney. But under the surface, the wires were tightening. I'd spent 40 years learning how to keep a business alive in silence. No press releases, no credit headlines, just paperwork that moved when it needed to. Now, every trick I'd ever learned was back in play. That morning I called Olivia Turner, the regional manager at Apple State Bank, the institution that handled the Reeds mortgage before I'd quietly bought it out. "Morning, Olivia," I said. "I'd like to request a review on loan 14273 Reed Residence, Albany County. Routine compliance, nothing urgent." "Of course, Mr. Caldwell," she replied, her voice all bank-trained politeness. "Should we notify the borrowers?" "Not yet," I said. "I just want the file moved to active audit for 30 days. Standard procedure." She paused. "Understood. Good." That meant the system would automatically generate a notice to the Reeds, an innocuous, bureaucratic letter asking for verification of insurance and income. Nothing scary. Not yet. Just enough to make them check their mailbox twice a day. Next call went to Diana Hayes, my lawyer. "Everything's organized," she said. "I've tagged the audio recording, the mortgage purchase records, and every social media post where your daughter-in-law mentions the farm. If this goes to court, she'll lose before opening statements." "I don't want a courtroom," I said. "I want a classroom. People remember lessons longer than verdicts." Then Mark Jennings, my accountant. "Mark, we'll need the orchard's quarterly reports and the rental ledgers formatted clean," I told him. "If Vanessa wants to quote numbers, let's make sure she has the right ones." He chuckled. "You planning a press conference?" "Something like that," I said. "With better lighting." By noon, the gears were turning in 3 directions: legal, financial, and personal. On paper, I was just updating files. In truth, I was building a web. Each strand ran through a different office, each document perfectly legitimate. No threats, no lies, just truth sharpened to a point. That evening, Ethan and Vanessa drove in from Boston. Their SUV glittered like a showroom model as it rolled up the gravel drive. She stepped out first, in ankle boots that cost more than a month's farm payroll. "Dad!" Ethan called, smiling wide, maybe too wide. We wanted to talk business. That word again. Business. We sat at the old oak table in the kitchen. Vanessa placed a slim tablet between us, screen bright with an architectural rendering, a glossy image of a boutique-style resort with the Caldwell barn turned into a spa. "Picture this," she said. "A rural retreat. Yoga weekends, farm-to-table dining, private cottages among the apple trees." I leaned back, hands folded. "And who's paying for all that glass and nonsense?" "Investors," she said quickly. "We've got interest. But first, we need to free up capital, liquidate the land." "Sell the orchard," Ethan said softly, like he was repeating after her. "Sell the orchard," I echoed. The words felt wrong in my mouth, like biting into a wax apple. Vanessa beamed, mistaking stillness for approval. "You'd still have a stake, of course. Lifetime royalties, maybe naming rights for the spa. Caldwell Wellness Center has a nice ring, doesn't it?" I studied her the way a farmer studies a sky that's too bright, something unnatural coming. "What's wrong with the old name?" I asked. "It's limiting," she said. "It sounds small." I looked at my son. "You think this place is small, Ethan?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I think we could do more with it, Dad. You've worked your whole life, maybe it's time to rest." "Rest," I repeated. "That what you call selling your roots?" "Progress," Vanessa corrected. "We're not erasing you, we're re-evolving you." There it was. Evolving me. Turning flesh and memory into marketing content. I smiled. "You've thought this through?" She nodded, bright as a light bulb. "Of course. We already contacted a realtor. A developer from Burlington wants to walk the property next week." "That so?" I said. "Then I suppose you've done your homework." "Every inch of it," she said proudly. I stood, walked to the counter, and poured coffee into my chipped mug, the one with my father's initials fading near the handle. "Funny," I said, "because I've been doing a little homework myself." Ethan frowned. "About what?" "About mortgages," I said. "How they move around, get bought and sold like poker chips. How sometimes, the people paying them have no idea who's on the other side of the check." Vanessa blinked, confused. "Why would you care about mortgages?" "Because I like knowing who owes who," I said, sipping slow. "Makes the world easier to understand." She forced a laugh. "You really are old school, Henry. Nobody thinks that way anymore." "That's their mistake," I said. When they left, Ethan looked back at me through the truck window, worried, maybe, or just unsure whose version of the future he believed. Vanessa didn't look back at all. After they drove off, I called Olivia at the bank again. "Did you send that review notice?" "Went out this afternoon," she said. "Certified mail." "Good," I said. "Let's keep the file active." Then I called Diana. "Add one more instruction," I told her. "If the Reeds contact the bank, I want the response to go through me first. No surprises." She hesitated. "You're walking a fine line, Henry." "I planted the line," I said. "I know where it runs." Outside, the wind picked up again, shaking the orchard. The branches creaked, heavy with what little fruit remained. I stepped onto the porch and watched a single apple fall, bounce once, and rest in the dirt. Every action has gravity. Every secret has weight. Vanessa thought she was pulling strings. She didn't realize the web was already spun, and every line of it led straight back to me. In a few days, that polite little letter would land in her parents' mailbox. They'd open it over breakfast, frown at the bureaucratic language, and call their daughter in confusion. And that call would be the first tug on the wire. I went back inside, poured the last of my coffee, and opened my notebook. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote one sentence. Harvest begins when the fruit forgets who planted the tree. The letter landed on Robert and Linda Reed's doorstep 3 days later. A white envelope stamped with the quiet authority of a bank, neat font, blue ink, no emotion. They opened it over breakfast in their modest Albany home, right as the coffee burned and the toast went cold. Loan review notice, it read. Please provide updated verification of income and homeowner's insurance within 14 business days. It wasn't threatening, not yet, but it carried the chill of something that could become threatening if ignored. Robert reread it twice, then 3 times, before sighing, I thought we were done with this. Linda frowned. We pay on time. Every month. Maybe the bank's changing ownership again, he said, trying to sound calm. Just paperwork. Vanessa didn't answer her phone that morning. She was too busy filming another video in my orchard, this time about how generational wealth traps young people into living someone else's dream. She didn't know her parents were sitting in their kitchen, holding a piece of paper that would one day connect directly back to me. 2 days later, I found Ethan in the barn, trying to replace a broken fuel line on the tractor. Grease smeared across his hands like guilt. Need a hand? I asked, stepping in. He looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. Always. I knelt beside him. The smell of diesel and metal filled the air, sharp, familiar, grounding. Vanessa's parents called, he said after a pause. Something about a mortgage review letter. I murmured. That's interesting. They're confused, he continued. They thought their bank went under years ago, but apparently someone bought the note. Some holding company. They don't even know who owns their house now. Maybe they'll find out soon, I said. Ethan studied me, brow furrowing. You know something, don't you? I met his eyes. I know everything has roots, son. Even debts. He wiped his hands on a rag. Vanessa's been stressed. She's worried about her parents losing their home. She thinks selling the farm would help them out, give them a new start. Selling my home to save hers? I asked quietly. He hesitated. It's complicated. Not really, I said. She's protecting her family by destroying yours. That's not fair, Dad. She's just scared. She didn't grow up with stability like we did. Stability, I repeated. You mean discipline? Work ethic? Accountability? I pointed at the grease on his hands. That's what stability looks like, son, something that stays when everything else washes off. Ethan looked down, torn. She's not a bad person. I never said she was, I replied. But she's walking a dangerous road. And she's dragging you behind her. He leaned against the tractor, exhausted. She keeps saying we have to modernize. That the farm's a symbol of holding on to the past. And what do you think? He exhaled. I think she's half right. The world's changing, Dad. Maybe it's time we change too. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But change isn't progress if it costs you your soul. That night, he stayed for dinner, just the two of us. We ate in the quiet clatter of silverware and clock ticks. Halfway through his plate of stew, Ethan put down his fork. Dad, he said softly. What would you say if I told you Vanessa's parents are in trouble? That they're about to lose their house? I'd say trouble finds those who spend like drought never comes, I said. They're not reckless, he said. They just had bad luck. Business failed, medical bills, you know how it goes. I know, I said. That's why I helped. He blinked. Helped. I pushed my chair back, stood, and walked to the old roll-top desk by the window. It smelled like cedar and ink and years of decisions. I unlocked the middle drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. Here, I said, laying it on the table. Ethan opened it, eyes scanning the first page. Then his jaw dropped. Read Mortgage Apple State Bank owner of note, Caldwell Holdings LLC. He looked up, stunned. Dad, this is you. I nodded. Has been for 5 years. You bought their mortgage? From a failed bank portfolio. It was a smart investment at the time. Does Vanessa know? No, I said. And she won't. Not yet. He sat back, running both hands through his hair. You've been collecting their payments? I have. Never raised their interest rate, never missed a credit. I even gave them 3 months grace during the pandemic. Why? Because I don't collect debts to punish people. I collect them to protect value. Including theirs. He stared at the papers again, disbelief slowly curdling into realization. You own their house. You own the roof over her parents' heads. I do, I said quietly. And that means, son, when Vanessa mocks this farm and everything it stands for, she's mocking the man who's been keeping her family out of foreclosure. Ethan closed the folder carefully, like it might explode. Dad, what are you going to do? I poured us both coffee, black and strong. Nothing yet. Sometimes mercy is the most powerful weapon you can hold. But if she keeps pushing, if she sells this land out from under us. You'll foreclose, he said. I met his gaze. I'll let the math decide. He looked at me differently then, not as a frail man recovering from surgery, but as something older, colder, carved from the same hard wood as the desk. After a long silence, he whispered, Does Mom know? Your mother knew who I was, I said simply. That's why she trusted me. Ethan nodded, eyes distant. Vanessa thinks power comes from followers. You think it comes from patience. Power comes from leverage, I said. And I've spent a lifetime learning where to apply it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You're not going to destroy her, are you? No, I said. She'll do that herself. I'm just building the mirror. The next morning, before dawn, I found him standing on the porch watching the fog roll down the hill. He looked younger again, maybe because the burden of pretense had started to crack. I couldn't sleep, he said. Kept thinking about what you told me. Good, I said. Truth should keep a man awake at least once in his life. He turned to me. If Vanessa keeps pushing, I'll stop her. But she deserves to know the truth eventually. She'll know, I said. But not yet. First, she has to see what truth looks like. I handed him a thermos of coffee and a folded copy of the Reed mortgage notice. Keep this safe, I told him. Proof matters more than anger. He nodded, eyes glinting in the pale light. As he drove away, I looked out at the orchard again. Dew shimmered on every apple like tiny glass eyes, all watching, waiting. For the first time in weeks, I felt my heart steady, not in peace, but in purpose. Vanessa had built her story on borrowed pride. I owned the story she didn't even know existed. And sooner or later, she would learn what happens when debt and deceit ripen on the same branch. The first real crack came on a Tuesday morning when I opened my laptop and saw her face everywhere. Vanessa Caldwell, trending across TikTok, Instagram, even a short clip reposted on a local news feed. The title read, Breaking the Cycle of Generational Failure, My Truth About Rural Life. I didn't even have to click play to know she'd finally crossed the line. When I did, though, I sat through every second. The video began with her sitting on the farmhouse porch, the same one I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago, wearing a cream sweater and that careful influencer half-smile. Behind her, the golden orchard glowed like something staged. You can love people and still admit they've failed you. She began. My husband's family clings to the past like it's holy. They call it tradition. I call it fear. Sometimes, we inherit habits disguised as values, like refusing to move on, refusing to grow. She gestured toward the barn as if it were a grave marker. This farm represents everything wrong with that mindset. Comfort over ambition. Routine over risk. Poverty disguised as pride. Each word hit like a slow nail into wood. I watched her point to my tractor, to the old apple crates lined up by the fence, to the kitchen window where I'd taught Ethan to peel apples with a paring knife. "I'm done letting nostalgia keep me small," she said, voice trembling with conviction. "It's time to break free." I paused the video halfway through. Outside, the autumn wind scraped dry leaves across the porch. I could smell the wood smoke from the neighbor's chimney. Every sound in the world felt slower. Heavier. I hit play again. "We're selling the orchard," she said. "We're moving where life actually happens." I refuse to let my future children inherit limitation. Then she smiled bright, fearless, ignorant. "Follow me if you believe in growth. #generational freedom. #legacy reset." The video cut to a montage, designer boots crunching on gravel, my barn doors creaking open, a close-up of her hand running over weathered wood. Every frame edited for tragedy, every caption begging for sympathy. And it worked at first. By nightfall, she had 3.8 million views and nearly 120,000 followers. The comments rolled in fast. "You're so brave for speaking your truth. In-laws like that are anchors. Get out while you can, Queen." But the internet, like an apple orchard, turns sour fast when left untended. The next morning, the tone shifted. "Wait, didn't your father-in-law pay for your wedding? Funny how you're wearing a $1,200 coat while calling yourself poor. If you're escaping poverty, why are you filming from a mansion-sized porch? This story isn't adding up, Vanessa." Within 24 hours, the tide had turned. The queen of authentic struggle was suddenly the villain of her own narrative. I didn't need to defend myself, the world was doing it for me. But what made me smile wasn't the comments. It was the text message that came later that evening, sent from Ethan. "Dad, we need to talk." He showed up an hour later, pale and tight-jawed, phone in hand. "She posted that without telling me," he said. "I found out when my coworkers sent me the link." I gestured to the chair across from me. "You watched it?" He nodded. "Twice. Once as her husband, once as your son. The second time hurt worse." I let him sit with the silence. It's something the young rarely do anymore. "Finally," he said, "people online are tearing her apart. She's crying, deleting comments. I don't even know who she is anymore." "She's exactly who she's always been," I said. "The difference is now the world sees it too." He looked down, twisting his wedding ring. "I think I understand now why you waited. Why you didn't fight her publicly." I leaned forward. "Because sometimes, if you let someone keep talking, they'll build their own gallows." He didn't laugh. Just nodded, slow. "Dad, her parents called me. They got another letter from the bank. They're terrified." "Did they ask for help?" "Yes." "And did Vanessa tell them where that help's been coming from for the last 5 years?" He swallowed. "She doesn't know. She still thinks the mortgage belongs to Hudson Mutual." "Good," I said. "That's the last piece that needs to fall into place." That night, as rain started ticking against the windows, I gathered every document I'd been collecting into a single pile on my desk: the recordings, the property deeds, the mortgage note, the profit sheets from the orchard, the screen captures of every post she'd ever made about escaping generational poverty. Each paper was clean, organized, labeled. The story told itself without my commentary. But still, I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. Patience, I reminded myself, is the farmer's greatest weapon. You don't harvest just because the fruit looks ripe, you wait until it separates from the branch willingly. The next morning, Olivia from the bank called. Mr. Caldwell, the Reeds reached out. They're concerned about the mortgage review letter. What did you tell them? Just that the loan is current and under standard reassessment. I didn't mention your ownership. Good, I said. Keep it that way. Then she hesitated. Sir, there's something else. Their daughter called, too. She was rather upset. I smiled into the phone. I bet she was. Later that day, as the sun broke through the gray, Ethan came back to the farm with his shoulders squared like a man walking into truth. She wants to apologize, he said. For the video. Publicly or privately? She says both. I nodded. Private apologies fix relationships. Public ones fix reputations. Which do you think she cares about? He didn't answer. I closed my ledger and stood. Tell her the orchard will host a charity banquet next week. Local donors, press, the works. If she wants to make things right, she'll have her chance. A banquet? He asked. Yes. For the Caldwell Foundation. The one that funds agricultural grants. And a few quiet mortgages, I said. He studied me. You're planning something. Not planning, I said. Preparing. That night, as fog gathered low over the orchard, I walked the rows with a lantern. The trees were nearly bare now, branches thin and skeletal. The world was preparing to sleep, and I was preparing to wake it. Every revenge, I've learned, should have a lesson attached, otherwise it's just cruelty. Vanessa's lesson would be simple: you can't build fame on someone else's foundation. The cracks in her image were already spreading. All I had to do was show everyone what had been under the glass all along. By the time I blew out the lantern, the plan was clear. The Harvest Hearts Banquet annual fundraiser for the Caldwell Foundation, attended by donors, bankers, and half the local press, would take place the following weekend. Vanessa loved cameras. She'd walk right into her own undoing. Ethan looked at me as I locked the barn door. You're really going to do this, aren't you? I placed a hand on his shoulder. Son, the truth doesn't need an invitation. It just needs a stage. And in 6 days, I'd give it one. The night of the Harvest Hearts Banquet came dressed in silver and fire. The maples along the drive blazed red under the lanterns, and every guest who stepped onto the grounds of Caldwell Orchards thought they were arriving at a storybook event. Music, candles, the smell of cinnamon and roasted apples drifting through the chill Vermont air. To the donors and local officials, it was a charity gala. To me, it was a reckoning. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black suit that had seen more funerals than celebrations. Ethan helped me into my seat at the head table. He hadn't said much all week, just worked quietly, made sure the press releases went out, double-checked the guest list. He knew what the evening meant, even if the rest of the county didn't. The Caldwell Foundation had been funding agricultural scholarships and small business grants for 15 years. Every autumn, we hosted this banquet to celebrate local families who built something from nothing. Ironically, the theme this year chosen by my event planner months ago was Roots and Renewal. Appropriate, I thought. Some roots grow deep. Others rot unseen. By 7 o'clock, the ballroom in the renovated barn was full. Crystal lights twinkled across the rafters. The string quartet played a gentle waltz. Guests mingled over cider cocktails and passed trays of baked brie. Cameras flashed. The smell of wealth, new and old, mingled with hay and wood polish. Vanessa made her entrance at 7:15. I'll admit, she looked spectacular. A cream silk gown, hair swept into an elegant knot, diamond earrings catching the light like they belonged there. She'd brought her phone, of course, streaming the whole evening live under the caption, "Finally celebrating authentic success. Harvest Hearts New Beginnings." The crowd parted for her the way they do for beauty that doesn't yet realize it's fragile. She smiled, laughed, shook hands with local dignitaries who didn't know they were shaking hands with their evening's cautionary tale. Ethan followed behind, wearing his good navy suit, no tie. His eyes found mine across the room. He gave one small nod. Everything was ready. At 8 o'clock, dinner began. Roast chicken with cider glaze, maple carrots, the usual Vermont show of simplicity wrapped in refinement. I barely tasted a bite. My focus stayed on the briefcase by my chair filled with every document that told the Reveiling story, the deeds, the contracts, the mortgage note, the screenshots of Vanessa's poverty campaign. When dessert plates cleared, Margaret Henson, the foundation chairwoman, stood at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, smiling at the crowd. "Tonight, we honor generosity, the kind that grows communities from the ground up. But before we begin our donor recognitions, we'd like to welcome a man whose work speaks quietly but carries across generations. Please join me in thanking our founder and benefactor, Mr. Henry Caldwell." The applause rose polite and warm. Vanessa clapped, too, still smiling, unaware that the ground beneath her chair was already cracking. I rose, steady despite the ache in my chest, and walked to the podium with the briefcase in hand. The room fell silent as I set it on the table and looked out across the faces: neighbors, bankers, county officials, reporters, and one trembling young woman live streaming her own undoing. "Thank you, Margaret," I began. "I don't make speeches often. The trees do enough talking for me. But tonight calls for clarity." I paused, letting the hush grow deep. "Some of you may have seen a certain story circulating online, a story about this farm, this family, and a so-called legacy of poverty. It's a good story. Tragic, dramatic, marketable. Unfortunately, it's also fiction." A murmur rippled through the room. Vanessa shifted in her seat. I opened the briefcase. The Caldwell farm has been called outdated, worthless, even a symbol of generational failure. But here's what the numbers actually say. I pulled out the first document, unfolding it beneath the lights. Caldwell Orchards LLC, annual revenue, $3 million. Supplier to 5 major grocery chains. Employment, 67 full-time workers. A few heads turned. The reporters scribbled. Next document. Maple Hollow Rentals, 16 residential properties, current valuation, $7.4 million. Silverbrook Holdings, investment division, minority stakes in distribution companies across New England. Combined, they make up an agricultural enterprise valued at over $28 million. Gasps fluttered through the room. I turned toward Vanessa's table. She sat rigid, her live stream still running. The reflection of my presentation glowed on her phone screen. "But that's not the interesting part," I said. "The interesting part is how this success has quietly supported others. For instance." I held up another document, embossed with a familiar address. The Reed Residence, Albany County, New York. Current mortgage balance, $980,000. Purchased 5 years ago from Hudson Mutual Bank by Caldwell Holdings LLC. Payments received in full and on time. Silence. Pure, crystalline silence. Mr. and Mrs. Reed, I continued, turning my gaze toward Vanessa's parents seated near the back, "I appreciate your punctuality as borrowers. Truly. You've kept your home thanks to this farm's profits, the same farm your daughter has been publicly calling a burden." Linda Reed's hand flew to her mouth. Robert's face drained white. Vanessa's phone clattered to the floor. I clicked the projector remote. The screen behind me lit up with stills from Vanessa's videos, captions in bold white font. Escaping rural poverty. Breaking free from failure. No one should live like this. The crowd gasped again. I let the images hang there, every frame a confession she'd already made to millions. "These are her words," I said quietly. "Not mine. She used this land as her stepping stone, this family as her storyline, and our name as her content. She built fame on mockery, not merit. And while she was performing hardship, this farm was paying her parents' mortgage. Vanessa stood suddenly. Stop please, just stop. Her voice cracked under the weight of every lie collapsing. Henry, I didn't know. That, I said softly, is exactly the problem. I turned to the crowd again. Ignorance isn't innocence. It's negligence. When you mock the hands that feed you, you don't just betray gratitude, you betray decency. The room was still. The only sound was the quiet hum of the projector. I closed the briefcase. The Caldwell Foundation will continue supporting honest families, students, and farmers who work hard and speak truth. But effective immediately, all sponsorships, donations, and loans connected to the Reed family will be under review. Robert Reed tried to stand, but his wife pulled him back down. Vanessa's mascara streaked black lines down her cheeks. Ethan sat beside her, head bowed. I looked at my son. Ethan, you have a choice. You can stay tied to a performance, or you can help rebuild what matters. He rose slowly, meeting my eyes. I'm done performing, he said, voice steady. I'm with you, Dad. Something in the crowd broke, first whispers, then applause. It started small, polite, unsure, then grew louder, until the whole room was clapping, not out of cruelty but out of understanding. Vanessa turned, eyes wild. You've humiliated me. No, I said. You did that yourself. I just turned on the lights. I stepped away from the podium, the weight of months finally lifting from my chest. The air smelled of apples and smoke and endings. As I walked back to my table, a few guests stood to shake my hand. The reporters were already writing headlines in their heads. Vanessa gathered her coat, face pale, and hurried toward the exit. Ethan didn't follow. He stayed rooted beside me. When the doors closed behind her, the applause quieted again. The MC, flustered but brave, tried to resume the program. But no one was listening. The story had already been written. Later, as the hall emptied, I stepped outside into the cold night. The orchard spread before me, dark and endless, the moonlight tracing silver lines through the rows. I breathed deep the scent of soil, sweet and iron-rich. Ethan joined me a minute later. That was brutal, he said. It was honest, I replied. Brutal's just what truth feels like to people who aren't used to it. He nodded. Do you think she'll ever understand? Maybe, I said. But understanding's like harvest, it only happens after the season ends. We stood there in silence, two silhouettes against a field of quiet trees, while the last of the guests' cars rolled down the gravel road. The night was still, and for the first time in months, so was I. The performance was over. The lesson had just begun. 3 mornings after the gala, I woke to the kind of silence that only comes after a storm, clean, heavy, and absolute. The newspapers had already done their work. Local influencer exposed at charity gala, read one headline. Farmer reveals hidden empire, said another. Everywhere, people were talking in the diners, at the bank, even at the feed store. For most, it was gossip. For me, it was closure. The first call came from Mark Jennings, my accountant. She's deleted everything, he said. TikTok, Instagram, the website gone overnight. She'll be back, I said. The ones who live for applause always come back for an encore. Her sponsors dropped her. The bank's inbox is flooded with reporters asking if the mortgage story's real. It's real, I said. But it's over. The second call was from Olivia Turner at Apple State Bank. Mr. Caldwell, she said cautiously, the Reeds made full payment this morning, certified check for 3 months ahead. They've also requested to meet with you personally. I'm not ready to talk, I told her. Let them breathe first. A lesson doesn't sink in while the echo's still loud. I understand, sir, she said softly. And for what it's worth, you taught this whole town something about quiet power. By the end of the week, the consequences had spread like frost. Robert and Linda Reed both resigned from their local design consultancy, the same one that had relied on my rental properties for showroom space. Their phones stopped ringing. Their daughter, the woman who'd once turned my home into a backdrop for her pity, was nowhere to be found online. The Caldwell Foundation Board released an official statement: effective immediately, we will redirect funding to educational programs focused on integrity and sustainability. I didn't need to mention names. Everyone knew who had inspired the amendment. On the 7th day, Ethan came to the farm. He parked his old truck beside mine and stood there for a long time, watching the orchard shimmer under the late October sun. The trees were nearly bare now, bones against the sky, but they still looked proud. "She's gone," he said finally. "Vanessa moved out. Said she needs time to figure out who she is." "And who are you?" I asked. He smiled weakly. "A man who took too long to listen." We walked toward the barn together, boots crunching over fallen leaves. Inside, the air smelled of sawdust and apple pulp, familiar, grounding. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was his wedding ring. "I don't know if it's over for good," he said. "But I know I can't build a life on lies. Not hers. Not mine." I nodded. "Good timber doesn't grow in soft soil. Sometimes, you have to cut down a sick tree before the whole grove rots." He nodded, then looked around the barn, the wooden beams, the stacked crates, the old ledger book still sitting on my desk. "Dad," he said quietly, "you never cared about revenge, did you?" "No," I said. "I cared about memory. I needed her and maybe you to remember where all this came from." He ran his fingers along a beam carved with initials H+M, 1979. "His mother's and mine. She'd have liked tonight," he said. "She'd have hated it," I corrected, smiling. "But she'd have understood why." The next afternoon, as the sun dipped low, a car pulled into the drive. Vanessa stepped out, dressed simply this time, jeans, a plain sweater, no camera in sight. Her face looked smaller somehow, softer. "Henry," she said. "May I come in?" I nodded, motioning to the porch. She sat where she once filmed her escape video, staring out at the orchard. "I wanted to apologize," she began. "Not the kind you record. The real kind." "Go on," I said. "I thought wealth was money," she said slowly. "Then I thought it was fame. But I've never felt poorer than I have this week." "That's how truth works," I said. "It takes before it gives." She looked at her hands. "My parents didn't know you owned their mortgage. They were terrified. I did that to them. I did it to you. And I don't know how to fix it." "Start by not repeating it," I said. She blinked back tears. "I've lost everything." "No," I said gently. "You've lost illusions. Everything real is still standing." We sat in silence, watching a flock of starlings lift and twist above the orchard, dark shapes moving as one. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally. "Good," I said. "Forgiveness isn't a currency. You don't buy it. You earn it." She nodded, then stood. "Thank you for not ruining my parents completely." "I wasn't teaching vengeance," I said. "Just respect." Before she left, she turned back once more. "You were right," she said. "About legacy." I didn't answer. The wind did it for me, whispering through the bare branches. That evening, Ethan joined me on the porch again. We didn't speak for a while. The horizon burned orange, the kind of light that makes even an old man feel young for a minute. "Dad," he said finally, "what happens now?" "Now?" I smiled. "Now the frost comes. It kills what's weak, so the strong can grow again in spring." He looked at me, understanding dawning. "You mean us?" I mean everything, I said. We sat there until the stars came out, quiet and infinite. In the distance, the wind chimes I'd built from his mother's old copper ladles tinkled softly. Every sound of that orchard, the shifting branches, the settling boards, the sigh of the earth cooling felt like an exhale after years of holding its breath. Before heading inside, I opened my old ledger and wrote one final entry under the day's date. Harvest complete. No debts remain. Then, beneath it, a line my father had once told me. Generational wealth isn't land or money, it's character. Because character survives every season. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the house fall back into darkness. Outside, frost began to form on the last few apples clinging to the trees, the final shimmer of a year that had taught every one of us what it truly meant to grow.